welcome. It is time once again for the CU Immigration Forum here on WRFU LP Urbana 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I am here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana-Champaign community. That views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, or the Urbana Socialist Forum, or, as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself and my charming guest, who will introduce herself right now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cristina Valdez, and I'm currently a senior at the University of Illinois.
Oh, yeah, senior at the University of Illinois. Does that make you, does that mean you're almost finished?
Yes.
Wow.
2 short months.
2 short months. Ooh, and then what? Off to bigger and better things, grad school?
Hopefully, yes, grad school.
Ah.
I'm actually waiting to hear back. I should be finding out sometime this week or next week. So.
Mm-hmm. What are you going to be?
Well, I've applied for programs in international affairs and public policy. So they're 2-year programs, and then after that, I hope to either join the Foreign Service or work for the government.
The Foreign Service. I don't even know what that is. It sounds really big and mysterious, but what is it?
It's essentially the diplomatic branch of the United States. So as a Foreign Service officer, you live in a different country on 2 to 3 year tours, and you act as a diplomat in each section of whatever country you're stationed at and whatever embassy.
That sounds really interesting. So how do you prepare for that? Like what qualifies you to be in the Foreign Service?
Basically, some sort of, you don't even have to have a specific background. You just have to have an interest in diplomatic and international affairs. And you have to take a really big exam to get into it. Then you have to pass a really long formal interview and then go to some training. So each time before you leave on a tour, you'll go through language training, cultural training, etc. And then you'll be at your post for 2 to 3 years.
Have you ever done anything even remotely like that?
Not really. Nothing diplomatic, I would say. I did intern at the United Nations last summer, so that's as close to diplomacy as I've gotten so far.
And so I'm trying to picture what that would be like. So it's sort of like walking around the U of I campus. You know, there's people from all over the world going around. And you have to interact with them in some way?
Yes, you interact with them. A lot of times I had to observe meetings, take notes. I worked more directly with the U.S. ambassador. Her name is Samantha Power. And I basically planned all her diplomatic events. So anytime she would be like, oh, I need a meeting with the Russian ambassador, I would figure out all the logistics for that, get in touch with his people, and make it happen.
Wow, that sounds interesting. So this is something you've actually been working towards for a while.
Yes.
When did you just wake up one day and think, I'd like to be an ambassador?
Well, my interest in it really started when I was studying abroad in Sweden. I lived in Uppsala for 6 months in the spring of my sophomore year. And before that, I was really into I love American politics. I want to go to law school. But in Sweden, I met so many people from all over the world, and we had some really good conversations, a lot of times about politics or just culture in general. And that really got me interested in exploring international affairs mostly. So once I came back to campus, I started taking more international relations courses, getting in touch with people who were involved in that sort of realm. And then I just fell into, working at the UN, and really it's now become my passion.
That's really interesting. So do you intentionally place yourself in situations where you're going to be around people from other countries just so that you can sort of practice your sense of reading them or getting okay, what's the right way to interact? Because when I'm around people from clearly different cultures, I'm fascinated by it. I'm always watching it, and I'm always thinking, okay, how do they go about interacting, and what should I or should I not do? Because it's easy to just stumble in and go, oh, I'm going to be really loud. And some people really don't like you to be loud. But other people are very loud, and they expect you to be very vigorous in your expression. So it's just interesting to observe those different things and see how you can fit yourself in there.
Exactly.
And I don't know, I find it fascinating.
I really enjoy that. While I was in Sweden, that was something I had to get used to. I'm a Latina woman, so I'm really loud and expressive. And in Sweden, they're very reserved and quiet. So that was my first, besides moving to the United States, that was my first experience where I had to sort of like adjust myself to fit into the culture. So once I came back to campus, I've really looked for opportunities to sort of like assist people in that experience and get to know their culture as well. So I work at the Study Abroad office, and I'm also on the executive board of International Alumni, and we basically plan events for students, international students, and students who have studied abroad to get to know each other and really get themselves integrated into the campus. Just recently, we had an event where I was surrounded by a lot of students from Korea, and it was really interesting to hear, how they like the campus, the differences that they see, and learn a little bit more about their culture. So it's something that I really enjoy.
Well, right now you're working at the University YMCA,
Yes.
Is that correct, as an intern?
Yes.
That probably gives you a lot of opportunity to be around different people.
Definitely.
In situations. Are there, I would assume most people that come here to study sort of arrive with this sense of like, okay, I have to adjust to this environment. So it's probably less, you do have to adjust to them to a certain extent, but they're consciously making attempts to adjust to the overall environment, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So that creates an interesting space where everybody's kind of tiptoeing around everybody else, like being very careful, like, oh, I know, okay, not so sure what you people are into here. And wow, that's interesting, yeah. Because the events that I go to on campus, I used to go a lot more than I do now because I'm working so much. I hardly ever have time to get over there just to go to things, just random events. But I used to try to go to as many different like things at the cultural houses and that sort of thing as I could, just to sort of, I don't know, test myself is kind of a weird way of putting it, but just to sort of see how well I could adapt to these different environments. And
putting yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, that's partly, and you may be able to relate to this. I've never exactly had a comfort zone because you were saying that you came here from another country. Is that correct?
Yes. That's right.
I'm a second generation immigrant, but even so, I've never exactly felt at home here. I've always felt a little bit outside of everything. I've never quite understood what people were doing, and that might be part of the interest in different cultures, because I was surrounded by cultures that were, I probably come across as very American. I speak flawless English, and it's very ordinary, but even so, I still feel a little odd in some kinds of situations, like particularly if I get too far away from this town and into some of the smaller rural communities, I feel really lost. I kind of know what to do, but it's not instinctive. I have to be thinking about it,
Yeah.
And I forgot what my original point was. I don't know.
Well, I can relate to what you're saying, definitely. I'm from the Dominican Republic, and I moved to Oklahoma when I was 8 years old.
Oh, Oklahoma.
So it was definitely a very different experience. I'm from Santo Domingo, which is the largest city in the Dominican Republic, and then moved to this really tiny town in the middle of Oklahoma, where everybody's known each other, since they were young. So it was definitely something that was difficult for me to break into.
Yeah.
And then I decided to come to Illinois for school, and one of the biggest things that attracted me to Illinois, the university specifically, is all of the diversity. Because I grew up in a city, where it was just Caucasian people. There were, a few African Americans, maybe 2 or 3 Latinos, including myself, 0 Asians, zero Middle Eastern people. So that's something that I really wanted to seek out during my education. My parents have always loved to travel. We traveled a lot while I was younger, and even now. But I can relate to that sense of like you never have like a really like super comfortable area. And that's something that I find myself, the only times I really, really feel comfortable and like I feel like this is my aspect, this is my realm where I need to be, is when I'm around like a lot of other Dominican people, like specifically my family. And it doesn't matter where we are. I don't really travel back to the DR a lot. But, you know, when we all get together for Thanksgiving or whatever, whether it's just like family, friends, and a few members of my family, I get like really comfortable, and I'm just like, this is like my culture. This is what I really enjoy. But aside from that, you know, there's never been like a cohesive community that I found where I'm like, oh, I really feel at home here. So that's interesting. I don't know if that's just a part of the whole immigrant experience or if it's something that's just unique. But
I think it's a part of some people's immigrant experience. It's not really, I can't relate to that myself because my parents consciously attempted to raise me to fit in. So they wanted me to be as American as possible. And so there was no Spanish speaking around the home at all. It was all English. And, you know, we celebrated American holidays and you know, did all the usual stuff that, you know, a typical Midwestern kid would probably experience, except that the people teaching me didn't know that stuff in the same way that, you know, they would have if they had parents from here.
Yeah.
So they were aping is a bad word, but they were parodying a middle-class white lifestyle or lower middle class, I guess you might say, white lifestyle. And so I grew up sort of thinking that I was just like everybody else, but not really feeling like everybody else, you know. So I had this weird thing. And in the, what was it, late 70s, early 80s, I decided to go out to California to live. And I moved out there for a while because I thought, oh, finally, I'm going to be around people that are like me. You know, I'll have that experience that you're talking about. Except that I didn't. When I first started seeing Mexicans out there, it was like, these people are as alien to me as everybody else. You know, I mean, they're totally alien to me. I had no, you know, sense of like familiarity at all. I mean, over time, once I got to know people and hang out, I started to get this like, okay, I kind of get this. I get this way of being, and you know, but it was never like a natural. It was never a thing where I just felt like, I'm at home. Nobody looked like me really, you know, nobody talked like me, nobody thought like me. So I get what you're saying, but it was not my experience at all. But that's an interesting thing that I have found from talking to other immigrants is that everybody's experience is kind of different in sometimes major ways, sometimes very subtle ways, but it is a really different thing, and it's because we are all different. Your experience is different, mine is. So we are related in the sense that we share this common, you know, experience of having been born in some other place or whatever. But beyond that, it's just a very personal thing, and it's not something, I guess, which is a good reminder when you're tempted to just lump people together in a group and say, oh, those people are no more cohesive than we are. Yeah. They just look that way from the outside because we don't understand them or we don't know them. And I think that's probably... I remembered my point that I was going to make earlier about us both being immigrants was just that maybe explains our interest in or consciousness of other people's cultures and attempting to kind of like understand it and fit in because it's something you've had to do in your life. And so it's like, hey, well, this is something I already know how to do this. So I could take this and turn it into like a profession and just do it for a living because I've been doing it forever. Yeah. I'm good at this. So anyway, well, that's really interesting. That's interesting background and trajectory you have going here, and I think it's a very cool thing because you're going to see so much, and you're going to experience so many different things and understand so many different things than probably most people will because they're just not exposed to it. You know, most of it's kind of just go through life and you know, I got a job and I go home and you know, that's all we do. That's pretty much our whole thing. But your job is going to be meeting new people and going to interesting places.
I hope so.
So a lot of traveling. what am I trying to say? You don't like feel sort of tense about that traveling, like, oh, I'm going to go these, maybe there's a war zone, maybe there's, because it's kind of dangerous in some places, right? To do
Yeah,
this sort of
in
thing?
some places it is dangerous, and you are required to do at least one hardship post during your tenure in the Foreign Service. But aside from that, you sort of just like switch it up every time you can. So that's actually one of the parts I'm most excited about. I love traveling and I love going to somewhere new and just like experiencing it. And I get really attached to wherever I live. So in Sweden, I did not want to leave, and I came back and I was obsessed with Sweden for a really long time. Then I lived in New York this summer, and I just like did not want to leave New York.
Wow.
And I was really obsessed with New York. I'm still into it, and I'll be there again this summer, interning at the UN again. And so it's just really nice for me to return to those places that I really love, but it's also really easy for me to get attached. But I sort of like the cycle of like, you live in one place and then you really like love it, and then you leave, go to another place, and it's the same thing happens over and over again. So
tell me something about Sweden that would surprise me. There are stereotypes of, they eat fish and you got blind. I don't know what they would be, but, is there something like you got there and you're like, wow, I had no idea that they were like this or that things were like this there?
One thing I would say, the level of like low context culture is, I think, a little bit shocking for most people, especially Americans. Just because Americans are loud, they don't mind like, you sitting next to them on the subway or the bus, whatever. But in Sweden, everything's about personal space. So, the bus will be full. Everyone will have a bag next to them, and you can't ask for someone to move the bag for you. You'll be waiting outside for the bus, and people stand at least like 3 feet away from you. So they really love standing in lines, but everything is like you have to keep your distance from other people. Another thing is you sort of have to reach out to them, because in their culture they don't want to bother others. So if they're interested in getting to know you, they'll just act really passively. They'll talk about the weather with you and whatnot, but you sort of have to be the one to reach out to them and really seek them out and say, let's hang out, do you want to chat? And they'll be like dying inside to hang out with you, but they won't say anything. So you have to be the one to make the first move all the time.
Are they like this with each other or just with
They are,
strangers?
yeah. And the way they get comfortable, so I heard from my Uppsala classmates, is once they all get drunk, they just like get comfortable with each other, and then they start hanging out a little bit more.
That's so interesting. Yeah, that sounds like a place I'd be right at home, because I'm kind of, I'm a little, arm's length-ish about people and things. I like space. I'm really uncomfortable when people like get too close to me. If I don't know them, I just back up all the time. And I'm not like afraid of anything. It's just, I feel their presence. It's like if you're standing here, I feel you. Like I physically, it's like, and I don't know if that's a personal thing, if it's an emotional thing, or an actual physical, like I'm able to sense the presence of others, and I feel your aura or something. I can feel people's proximity, and it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm aware of it. And it's like, okay, I would rather you. I'm comfortable with this distance between us here. But if you were a little closer, I'd be like leaning back.
Yeah.
And it's nothing to do with you. It's just I like this kind of space.
Definitely.
That's interesting.
It was difficult for me. I'm, really loud. I like to just be very open with everyone and like get close to people. So me and my friends sort of had to calm ourselves down and try to adjust a little bit.
Ease into things.
Exactly.
Good afternoon. Are they very polite? Very mannerly?
Extremely polite. Yeah, extremely polite. They'll always take their shoes off before they come inside. They'll, offer you things. Just really a polite people.
The Swedes and the Japanese ought to get together, because I have friends from Japan, and they're like that. They're just very, everything is very formal.
Yes.
Until they get to know you, and then it's even once they know you, it's still kind of formal in a kind of a funny way.
Yeah, I agree.
We're going through the motions of it. We're both laughing about it, but we're still going to go through the motions of being formal, because that's what we do.
Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what makes them like that.
I've studied a little bit of intercultural communication, and it's mostly because they are a Nordic people. So since you're so far north, you would think everyone would want to like huddle together for warmth, but it's exactly the opposite. It's a very individualistic culture, and it's a very low context. So keep your distance, keep your space. So it's definitely has to do with proximity, geographic proximity. Whereas, people south of the equator or on the equator, it's hotter, so they're more like open, louder, more boisterous,
Yeah.
Easier to get closer together.
So are Norwegians like Swedes?
Yes, Norwegians, the Danes, the Finnish, they're all very similar.
The Russians aren't like that, though.
No.
And they're very northern, so I'm not sure I'm buying this theory.
Well, Russia's also Asian, so it's Eurasian, so maybe they got a little bit of that going on, too.
Yeah, but they're loud.
They are.
And they're very like, oh, dog, good. Come in, have some vodka. They're just very, I don't know, I'm very fascinated by the different ways, because we're all basically human, you get really down to it. I'm sure we have more things in common than separate us, despite the age difference and gender and all that stuff. If we really just like got down to the minute details, it'd be like, well, I like chicken. There's probably so many more things that we have in common than we don't. And yet we as people, not just you and I, but as people, come up with so many different ways of packaging that, which is, I guess, what you'd call culture, is just packaging your humanity in a certain way. So this is our way of being, this culture right here.
Yeah.
And there's so many just like really, really different ways of doing that you would think that there would be dramatic differences in human beings, but there really aren't. We're all kind of just human beings. It's just strange that we interface with the world in such different ways.
I agree.
So you've done a lot of traveling, it seems.
Yes.
How many different countries have you been to?
I've been to 14 different countries.
14 different countries.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
I wish it was more.
Well, it will be. It sounds like it.
Yeah.
14 different countries. And are there... Well, I suppose you said you fall in love with everything, so you probably would like to go back to each and every one of these at some point.
I definitely would say so. The only one that I would probably take a couple years off before I went back is Russia. It was a little bit, that was extra culture shock for me. That was like, wow, like this place is totally different.
What part did you go to?
I went to St. Petersburg.
Oh, so you were up north and northwest?
Yeah.
Northwest, yeah. So what about that was so intense for you?
Just Russian people the country of Russia itself is just very different. The area that we were in, I would say it just feels like very closed off, and you sort of experience that feeling while you're there. So we had a tour guide because no one there speaks English. There's no English signs, nothing at all. So we were there with a big tour group. I would say probably about 35 other kids from other universities. And we took a cruise in, and just everyone's really serious. And since the country's so closed off, it sort of feels like you're in this vortex from like 1999, and like all of the cars are really old. There's no modern cars. People are wearing like fashions like from the early 90s, like pleather jackets and like corduroys, and you're just like, this is so different. And me and my friends really stuck out a lot. Number one, because I have like a darker skin tone, but my other friends, just the way that we all dressed, it's like we're wearing bright colors. Like it was summer, so it was like summery clothing. And everyone, we would just get these looks as we were walking down the street, like, what are you doing here? And even when we were like on tour and stuff like that, like just listening to what the tour guide was saying and stuff, there was still like sort of, you had this like limiting discussion. So nothing about the current government was said. Nothing about the government in the past 20 years was said. Nothing about that sort of history. I don't even think we got up to Gorbachev. It was just mostly about like the Russian czars and stuff like that. So you feel like you can't really be open about what's currently happening in the country, just because it is a different just kind of society where you're supposed to keep quiet and not criticize the government. So it was an interesting experience. It was, we went to the Hermitage Museum once, and there was just a circle of men just like drinking vodka from the bottle. It was like 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, this is nothing like I've ever seen before. And that's just normal, you know? So it was interesting.
Wow, that sounds like a really kind of an intense experience.
It was. We were only there for, I want to say 3.5 days, but I think that was enough for me for a little while.
How was the food?
The food, it was interesting. You know, I like to appreciate cultural things. So, you know, I try to delve into it. But the coolest thing was the bread. The bread is always in like these different sorts of shapes, and it's always filled with something inside, and you like never know what you're gonna get. So we had like bread that had like potato inside of it, or like meat or cabbage. So that was like the best thing that we had.
I thought it was really dense bread up there, like really, you know.
Their
hard,
rolls are always
bread.
Filled with something.
Huh. Yeah, it shows what I know about Russia. Yeah, I just always pictured like rye, or, you know, the really dark grain bread that's just really dry, like you'd be like going, after like a bite, and, give me the water. But, okay, apparently I don't know. But, yeah, I've heard a lot of different things about different cuisine. I'm fascinated by food. I'm not really a gourmet or anything, you know. I love to eat, and I like to try different things. And you hear about certain countries, just like everybody raves about French cooking. To me, French food is like, I don't know. It's not, I don't get it. Whatever it is that they're doing there, I'm not getting it. But I've heard like really fairly bad things about Russian food and about English, UK, food in the UK. Like Russian food is all like cabbage and just,
like
sort
a lot of
bland,
eggs,
beefy, you know, not very flavorful, just potatoes and meat and things.
Exactly.
And I think UK is similar. Well, believe it or not, a half an hour has gone by.
Wow.
So
time flies when you're having fun.
I'm going to have to close out the TV portion of the show. You're welcome to stay for a part 2 if you wish, but I'm going to have to thank everybody for watching and invite them to join us again next week for another edition of CU Immigration Forum here on WRFU LP and UPTV. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.